All right, we'll get our meeting started.
Bill, go ahead.
It's certainly good to see each and every one of you here today. Thank you for taking away from your time. I'm going to ask Supervisor Tatum if he'll do our opening prayer, and Supervisor Smith if she will do the pledge to the flag. So I'll stand, please.
Let's pray. Our dear Heavenly Father, we come to you today, Lord, just thanking you for all you do for us. Father, we thank you for this opportunity that we have to conduct a portion of the county's business, Father. We pray that everything that we say and do will be pleasing in your sight and according to your will. In Jesus' most holy and precious name I pray and ask it all. Amen.
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 I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Play ball.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to note that Mr. Mitchell, Ronnie Mitchell, is not with us. He's ill.
Right. And Mr. Leland Mitchell had a appointment in Roanoke, and he didn't know whether he was going to get back in time for this. So with that, so then this leads, that was a good segue into my question. We will save our questions until everybody's here. We'll get our books today, and staff on both sides, on the school staff and on the county staff, said they would meet with us either Thursday, this coming Thursday, or this coming Monday for questions and everything. And so everybody can be here on that. So which is your pleasure, Thursday or Monday? What suits?
I would go for Thursday, Mr. Chairman. I'm hoping that we'll have time as a board to work through the budget collectively so we can share our thoughts.
We've got until we got plenty of time.
What
Yeah.
time? What
What-
time?
2
What time
o'clock.
Thursday? What
2
time Thursday?
Thursday, 2 o'clock. Mike?
Yes, sir, that's fine.
All right, Thursday at 2 o'clock. Can y'all put that on your calendar then? Oh, well, that takes care of that then. That was hard enough, wasn't it?
You said we need to hold our questions till that.
We're gonna wait and hold your questions
Okay.
and everything so that both Mr. Mitchells can get their book, and they'll have a couple days to go through them. They just won't have the hear what's said. And then we'll have our questions and comments, and then we can, our schedule on Tuesday is fairly light, and we can have a good work session on Tuesday as well. Now, Tuesday, 12 o'clock, we got a broadband meeting.
Oh.
So if you don't have that at 12 o'clock, Tuesday is broadband. And then we'll have we'll have plenty of time. I done forgot already, but we're gonna do that agenda review, but it's just 3 or 4 items on there. And then I think it was 2 public hearings, and then the public comment. So that will be, so Madam Clerk, if you will make sure that both Mr. Mitchell's get their books, 2 o'clock Tuesday. All right, Dr. Cobbs, if you will come and present your presentation, please.
First, thank you, Board of Supervisors, for allowing us to come today to present the 22-23 proposed budget for Franklin County Public Schools. I will start off with the agenda. These are the items that we will cover today. We'll look at the ADM over time, the state revenue, and just so you know that our operational budget is based on the House of Delegates' proposed budget. And I'll explain that a little later. We'll look at the local revenue request, the state budget amendments, projected revenues, projected expenditures, minimum wage increase over time. We're going to discuss what caused the increase in our budget this year, the ADM impacts, the current impacts and future impacts, the federal grant updates, health plan updates, the capital improvement plan, and some of those projects that we're planning for 22-23, the debt service for fiscal year 23, budget initiatives review, proposed teacher salary scale for 22-23. I'll do a budget summary and review, and then you might, if you have any questions or discussions. But I think Mr. Thompson said we may save those for Thursday, but if you have some today, that's fine as well. So I'll start with the ADM over time. As you can see, starting back in 2005, 2006, there began, especially in 2007, a slight decline, ADM decrease over time. And as you can see, around March 2020 is when there was a sharp decline with ADM. So if you think about where we are right now, the budget that I'm going to present to you is based on our ADM average daily attendance of 5,840 students. This is also the number that the state is using for our state revenue. State revenue, like I said, the ADM budget is based on 5,840. Last year at this time, up to this point, we have seen a reduction of approximately 210 students. The SOQ funding, Standards of Quality funding, is based on the average daily membership, and that membership is as of March 31st for each school year. We know that there are approximately 1,030 students enrolled in homeschool, and why I bring this to your attention, this equates to a decline in our state revenue of about $6.3 million for the 22-23 school year. I'd like to bring to your attention that there, right now at the state level, there's a House consideration, there's a House version, and there's a Senate version. Well, what does this mean? This means that the House version is considering the school, we've talked about this before, the school construction allotments for schools. They're thinking about switching that over to a competitive grant, whereas the 2.9 based on formula for Franklin County Public Schools, the Senate version, it's still there as part of the operational budget. Also, there's for the House, there's a proposed change with the re-benchmarking amount, which would reduce our income or our operational budget of about $1 million. Just so you know, and I've already said, we're basing our operational budget on the House version, and the reason for that is that would give us the least revenue, and once all is said and done, what I hope is that our operational budget, there would be an increase based on the final state approval of the state budget. For the House version, the House is considering a 4% salary increase for those standards of quality position. Also, the House version is proposing a 1% bonus. And what I want to bring to your attention is the 1% bonus would not require a local match. The state version is proposing the 5% salary increase. Similar, we're proposing a 5% salary increase with the minimum step included. And I want to bring your attention, for those at the top of the salary scales, we are proposing a 3% increase for those at the top of the salary scales. And what that would do is this is needed to advance our salary position closer to the range that the compensation study is proposing. And again, the school construction funds of the 2.9, those funds are maintained in the Senate version, whereas the House version is in favor of a competitive grant. We would, if that's the decision that's made, certainly we would apply for the competitive grant, and our hope would be that we could even get a higher amount than the 2.9 million. The House version holds schools harmless for the proposed elimination of the sales tax on food, which that's about $200,000. Local revenue request. Franklin County Public Schools, we are requesting an increase of approximately $885,000 in local appropriation for operations. What this would do is assist with the minimum 5% salary increase with the step, and then it also would support the 3% for the top of the scale. Also, I want to include that it would also support the increase in inflationary cost. Again, I've said this, the proposed budget is based on the House of Delegates budget version, which is the lowest increase in the state, which is the lowest increase in the state revenue. We anticipate that the conference committee budget may yield some additional revenue. The requested increase provides additional funding for the local share, again, of the 5% salary increase, which is about $827,000. And then the additional funds would support inflation cost at about $58,000. I think in the budget, and you'll see later, we have approximately $320,000 built in our operational budget. So the $58,000 would cover the inflation cost that's unfunded, totaling the approximately $885,000. This will give you more of a breakdown right now, thinking about the House version and the Senate version, and there's about a $3.9 million difference between the two versions. And as I have said, the greatest difference is how the state will handle the school construction funds. Will it be an operational budget, or will it become a competitive grant? Also, another change, as I did mention to you, the whole harmless re-benchmarking, there's a difference there in the House versus the Senate budget. There's some other changes there that you can see, but I think the biggest difference, as I have mentioned, is regarding the school construction, and also for the House version, the 1% bonus payment. Projected revenues, as you can see from the chart. But what I would like to bring to your attention here is, if you look at the budget, the column, sorry. If you look at the 21-22 column, you can see the projected revenues for 21-22. If you go over to the column entitled 22-23, you will see some increases. What I'd like to bring to your attention is the majority of those increases are due to the ESSER funds. And especially if you look at the federal funds, you see an increase. Let me explain that. Last year, we did receive in the ESSER 3 funds. Those funds were not approved until September 2021. So that's why those funds were not in the current 21-22 budget. So we are showing those funds in the 22-23 budget. So that's where you're seeing the increase with the federal funds, and I wanted to point that out. The projected expenditures, I'm going to use that same, if you will look at the budget for 21-22, if you will look at that column versus the budget for 22-23 and the difference. What I'd like to highlight is you see some increases. Well, what we've done is we have sprinkled the ESSER funds throughout the different budget categories, and that's why you're seeing the increase in those different budget categories. I'm just going to use, I'll drop down to facilities, which is a large increase, but as you know, that is reflection of we have allotted approximately $9.2 million for the construction at the middle school for the HVAC and the roofing. Just want to show an example there. The administrative, attendance, and health, that 1.9 increase, that does show the support for the mental health psychologist and some of the other positions where we're using ESSER funding to support some of these positions. And as you know, there is a sunset for some of the positions that we have used ESSER funds to support, and that's why you're also seeing the increase in the instruction as well. You're seeing the evidence of the use of the ESSER funds. Minimum wage increase. There have been 3 increases since 2020. May 2021, there was an increase. The minimum wage went to $9.50. January, just this past January, the minimum wage went to $11. And then next January, 2023, the minimum wage will increase to $12. And I'm going to drop down to the last 2 bullets. The increase for the $11 increase for 2022 was built into this year's operational budget. The increase for 2023 is built into the operational budget for 2023, approximately $276,000. The other minimum wage increases there are contingent on the General Assembly. What is causing the proposed budget increase of $16.2 million? As I have mentioned before, we did receive ESSER 3 grant that was approved in September 2021, so totaling approximately $14.5 million. The cost of the proposed salary increases and the minimum wage increase for our teachers and all of our staff is approximately $3.1 million. The cost of providing 3% to the top of all salary scales is approximately $690,000. The cost of benefits for the 5% minimum step increase is approximately $774,000. The increased cost for Franklin County Public Schools, the school's contribution toward the health insurance rate is approximately $1.5 million. The additional reduction in planned staff due to attrition and retirement is approximately $633,000. There are additional costs, as I'm sure you all are experiencing this as well in the county, additional costs for fuel, parts, and other other pressures is about approximately $317,000, those inflationary increases. ESSER 2 was built in this year's budget. There has been a decrease of $1.9 million. There are additional proposed local contributions for operations. There would be approximately $885,000. Last year, or in this year's school budget, there was a reduction of approximately 12 teachers. In next year's budget, we are proposing a reduction of 9 elementary teachers as well. And this is a reaction to the loss of the ADM, which it would be a total of approximately 21 teachers over this year and last year, and that would total approximately $1.4 million. A look at our ADM loss and its current and future impact on Franklin County Public Schools. ADM losses are spread over 15 different schools and 13 different grade levels. Impacts, what we see have been mostly evident at the elementary levels, and you see the reduction of the 21 elementary teachers. But we know eventually we will feel the loss, the ADM loss at the middle and high school levels as our students begin to continue to move through the various grade levels. Again, a total of 21 elementary teachers are planned for reduction for this year, 21-22, which they have been reduced, and for next year. Over the past 15 years, and it really goes back to the chart or the line chart graph that I showed in the very beginning, the ADM has dropped from a high of around 7,300 students in 2006 and 2007 to the current forecasted low of 5,840 students. This is a reduction of approximately 1,465 students over the 15-year period. This would make an average of approximately 97 students per school over the last 15 years. ADM losses do not have an impact on operations until they begin so severe that schools begin to operate at enrollment levels that do not support efficient operations, and the schools operate at an elevated cost per pupil. Issues surrounding the pandemic and mitigation have had a significant negative impact to enrollment, as you all know. Large homeschooling population creates a significant state revenue loss and opportunity cost. And finally, we will be recommending to our school board in the near future, when I say near, September 30th, we would like to look at our ADM at that time. And if it warrants, we will recommend to our school board to contract for a complete efficiency analysis of the school division, which would include the number of facilities, class sizes, number of staff, programs, and transportation routes. The goal would be to right-size the division to enrollment, much like we've done with the teachers and staff over the past several years. The analysis would be paid for through the ESSER grant funds, as the impacts are academic related. The study would be conducted through the first half of the fiscal year 2023. Federal grants update, as you all know, at the onset of the pandemic, the school system did receive the CARES Act grants and the GEARS and ESSER set-aside grants. And those grants, the purpose was to reopen school amidst the pandemic. There are some balances left in those two grants. The CARES is approximately $18,000. The GEAR and ESSA grant is probably approximately $38,000. And I bring to your attention, when we received those two grants, the school system was told that we would partner with the local private schools. These amounts there were the amounts allotted to the private schools. So that's why those amounts are still there, and wanted to make sure that you were aware of why those amounts were still there. The ESSER 2 funds, the ESSER 3 fund grants, as you all know, we did receive those grants. ESSER 2 approximately $4.6 million. It was approximately $6.5 million. We've spent that down to $4.6 million. The ESSER 3 grant, we have approximately $14.5 million left. As you all know, these funds, we were given the guidance, could be spent in 5 different ways, and there are a list under those ways, and we're HVAC, air quality, mental health, instruction, learning loss, technology. It's the way that those funds could be spent and can be spent. We did purchase, we could purchase transportation as well, whatever we needed to do under those allotments that we were given, how we were told we could spend those funds. This year we have received some additional grants. We did receive a social emotional grant, approximately $15,000. We did receive the governor's HVAC grant of $1.2 million that we have set aside for the middle school projects, as you all know. And we did receive a $13,000 bus driver incentive grant, and we're really trying to figure out the best use of those funds. The federal grants have been instrumental in providing needed capital funds, as I aforementioned, of course, the air quality and some other projects that I have mentioned, but also the funds have allowed for us to upgrade the Glade Hill and the Suntag cafeterias with air conditioning. We're going to, over the next school year, invest in a private day facility, which would help bring some of our private day students back. Again, the middle school HVAC project, and the west building roof, I don't want to leave that out, and some other school construction projects. We have been able to purchase 5 school buses, and we're able to conduct some technology upgrades. Do want to highlight that the state still has approximately $1.1 billion in ARPA funds remaining, and hopefully when that becomes available, probably I feel like it would be a competitive grant. We will certainly be applying for some of those funds as well. Health plan update. Our medical costs and our pharmacy costs did go up. The medical costs are up approximately 20%. The pharmacy costs are up approximately 16%. Over a 2-year period, at one time we had approximately 1,016 employees who were taking advantage of the health plan. Currently, we have approximately 945 subscribers. Currently, claims over the 125,000 stop-loss total is approximately 188,000. Anthem is proposing approximately 22% increase in current funding rates for Franklin County Public Schools. Anthem is also proposing a 41% increase to individual stop-loss reinsurance. Hard reinsurance markets are prevalent at this time. The projected claims increasing is approximately 19%. For currently, the employer's cost is approximately $5.6 million. The proposed budget would increase the employer's cost to approximately $7.1 million. That would be an increase in the operational budget of approximately $1.5 million, totaling a 26.8 increase. The employee rate would increase by 9% at a cost of approximately $300,000. We were, and I do want to say, at one point it was at 18%, but we were able to provide an additional $300,000 so that the employee rate increase would only be 9% instead of 18%. We are addressing these potential increases by working with our benefits consultant to possibly adjust reinsurance amounts, marketing reinsurance, and looking at renewal calculations closer to the renewal date of July 2022. Currently, there's no proposed rate for the Delta Dental Plan and no proposed rate for the vision coverage. Capital Improvement Plan. The total budget of $1.2 million does include the $200,000 that the county is now providing for capital needs. It also includes the $340,000 earmarked for bus purchases. Some of the projected projects that's for 22-23 does include maintenance vehicle replacements. It includes plumbing and electrical projects, flooring projects. There's some needed water heaters in the Law and Ramsey building. There's some unit ventilators needed at Snow Creek. There's also some HVAC equipment that we were not able to place under the grant. There's a need for Suntag to upgrade the car rider line entrance, and there's a need for the West Campus canopy ceiling installation. As I have before mentioned, one of our primary capital improvement projects is the HVAC and roofing at the middle school, which we have earmarked $9.4 million toward that capital improvement. We were very appreciative. You, as the Board of Supervisors, did approve for us to use our carryover funds for the construction of the secure entrances at Burnt Chimney and Snow Creek Elementary Schools. Once the bids were open, we did find that we did need additional funding. We came back before you. You did approve an additional $195,000 from the carryover funds for the use for those two projects. Therefore, we do have a remaining approximately $227,000 in the carryover funds, which we will use for either purchase of school buses or if there are additional capital needs. Debt service. Currently, the debt service has dropped down to $565,000. It's dropped tremendously. Compensation and budget initiatives. It will start at the very top. Total projected salary and benefits, 5% minimum step increase, And we look at the employee health insurance coverage is approximately 81 million. All the grant awards that we've been granted is approximately 31.6 million. And I do want to say beyond the ESSA grants, this does include our title grants that we do receive. Next, we have the debt service. Again, I've mentioned that of the $565,000. So the expenditure budget, the revenue budget, is approximately $113,747,000. $113,747,696. We have broken down, again, our budget initiative list into 3 priorities, similar to what you've seen in the prior years. These amounts of each priority list, priority 1, priority 2, and priority 3, are not included in the budget expenditures. But you will see at the end of each priority list the total amount. And I'll just mention in priority 1, the priority 1 list is, and it has been in prior years, is about increasing salary scales to the market adjustments. So there's priority 1, then we have priority 2 and priority 3. The proposed salary scales, and we'll just use an example of the teacher's salary scales for 22-23. The 21-22 10-month bachelor's salaries, you can see it's a scale of 1 through 16, looking at a minimum 5% step increase. And then if you go over to the next column, you would see the 22-23 proposed scale, and that would be for a 10-month bachelor's scale. And all the scales, regardless if it's professional or classified staff, would receive the 5% minimum step increase. And just to remind everyone that those at the top of the scale, we are proposing a 3% increase. I just wanted to bring that to your attention as well. A budget summary for 22-23. As I have aforementioned, we are proposing a step increase with a minimum 5% raise, which is built into our compensation budget. We're also proposing a 3% for those at the top of the scale, which is built into the proposed budget. The minimum wage increase for January 2023 to the $12 an hour is built into the budget. The health insurance renewal increase of approximately 26.8% for Franklin County Public Schools is built into the budget, which is an increased total of about $1.5 million. As I have aforementioned, that our staff or employees would see a 9% increase in their health premiums. We have, and this is in reaction to the loss in ADM or the drop in ADM this year and next year, we are not going to rehire for approximately 21 elementary teachers. And I've said before, elementary school right now is where we're seeing the greater loss in ADM or the greater drop in ADM. Our budget, as I have mentioned as well, is we are basing our operational budget on the House of Delegates version, which what happens is that creates the need for $885,953 increase in the local appropriation. And again, this appropriation would support compensation initiatives and inflation cost. The school system is conducting a compensation study for to be considered in the 22-23 school year because the study has not been completed. What we would like to do is review those recommendations, but more importantly, we would also like to get the input of key stakeholders in those recommendations as well. And if resources warrant, we would like to implement those recommendations during the school years of 23, 24, 24, 25. As I had mentioned, the debt service cost, and it is built in the budget, is $565,000. And finally, our capital improvement budget is $1.4 million, which does allow for additional bus purchases and allows for us to address capital needs beyond the grant funding.
Thank you, ma'am. We'll take a 10-minute break, and Mr. Whitlow can prepare for his presentation.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a brief comment? before
Yes,
we
ma'am.
break? Dr.
Madam Clerk,
Cobb's-
we want to make sure that these comments or questions get back to both Mr. Leland Mitchell and Ronnie Mitchell as well.
I
Go
just
ahead.
wanted Dr. Cobbs to thank you for your presentation. I thought it was well executed and well put together. It's a thoughtful, conservative budget, and I'm very pleased to see the more well-rounded discussion about ADM. I think you're doing just an excellent job at articulating that to us, and it's very appreciated.
Okay, we'll take our break. You already answered it. Yeah.
Piece of candy?
Let's see what we got.
Well, I got these right here. You want some of them?
Tim, I
And
put
we still
some
got some? That's one of these.
Y'all ready?
chocolate.
Mr. Whitlow. All yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Nice to be with you this afternoon. County staff, I know we have a lot of county staff in the room today, as well as the sheriff and our school superintendent, director of finance, and school representation, as well as some of our other budget and department directors. Just want to thank everyone for being here this afternoon. We have a lot of information to cover, and so we'll jump right in. As we're proposing today's Franklin County fiscal year 2022-2023 budget, I would be remiss if I did not recognize and thank all of the county staff, not only the budget staff and finance staff, but specifically all of the county department directors, social service agency, our school system. As you all know, we have worked with the Board of Supervisors now for about a dozen work sessions this year, walking the board through all those respective areas. And while we'll touch on some of those things today, if there's not anything specific to a certain department that I can touch on today because of the amount of time, that's not to diminish anything, taking anything away from those respective departments or program areas. I just wanted to thank everyone because everyone's worked really, really hard. And thank the board. Thank you all for your tenacity and patience as we've got to this point in today's budget presentation. And so I'm going to start the presentation today, try to lighten the load a little bit here with this cartoon graphic. And the late Robin Williams, great comedian, actor, had a quote that he used to say. Carpe diem, of course, is seize the day, but Robin Williams said, carpe diem, seize the check. And of course, we all know that budgets are about choices and priorities, and there's always a limited amount of money for an over amount, if you will, of needs. And we all can see there that whether it's the swan or the crab, or I don't know if it's a crocodile or alligator, everyone's trying to get their fair share of the budget. And so I thought that was a great graphic. As we turn now to look towards the fiscal 23 budget, I'd like to review with you maybe where we are from a budgetary resource standpoint. And pleasantly, and we've shared some of this with you in our work sessions, our revenues are faring some better than initial projections. Our real estate continues with solid nominal growth. Our building permits, as one indicator of that, year-to-date growth of over 20%. Perhaps more encouraging is the value of that growth year-to-date is over 119% over last year. Since last summer, we've seen approximately 140 new single-family housing starts in the county. We're seeing the completion of the multifamily project in the Westlake Village. Very encouraged. And a lot of that work goes not only to the staff, but to the board and your foresight in terms of looking at population attraction and the need, identifying the need for housing in Franklin County. And coming off of last year's housing summit, we've been able to meet with various developers of varying interests and so forth. This board recently approved a 120-lot subdivision at the lake, and so a lot of opportunity for single-family homes. We know anecdotally, post-pandemic and during the pandemic, a lot of people are finding Franklin County, and certainly that helps go towards our real estate growth. That nominal growth is about 1.2%. As we turn to look at personal property, that's where we're pleasantly seeing very strong and healthy growth. That should be no surprise to anyone that has tried to purchase a used vehicle or a new vehicle rather in the current market. Now, that being said, I would like to set the stage for this budget. County staff is proposing the FY23 budget for modest minimal growth that we would normally see of 10%. We've met with our Commissioner of Revenue. We know anecdotally from commissioners of the revenues in Virginia that assessments on vehicles are up substantially, in some cases double-digit percentage increases. To that end, this budget allows room for potential relief this fall. And we may say, well, what does relief look like? Well, our Senator Suderline, representing a portion of Franklin County, Senate Bill number 12 unanimously was approved by the House of Delegates and the Senate, which allows localities in the event of a significant surplus for things like personal property to provide some relief. What that may look like, we'll work with our county attorneys and so forth on. As expected, likely the governor would sign that legislation. This is a matter, a topic of interest all over the Commonwealth of Virginia. And so I would just, again, like to set the stage. We're basing our budget, again, not unlike the school board budget, kind of budgeting their House of Delegates version. We're budgeting our minimal or nominal rather, personal property growth of about 10%. Anything above that, we know could be, but we're not going to know that value and that number until summer the earliest. And so we'll be back before you likely as a board to take a strong look at what that looks like. But this is what we know today. Our sales tax revenue is moderating. If you all, and likely will recall, during the pandemic, we saw significant, sometimes increases, at least that first year, in sales tax. That has moderated downward and trending downward. It's moderating. It's still strong. It's still healthy, but it is moderating. And of course, Dr. Cobb's presented a significant increase in school and state and federal funding, primarily from ESSER, which we know is restricted and likely a short-time clause, if you will, for one-time funding, not necessarily ongoing funding. I will say that to say, in terms of our resource outlook, fairly solid of where we are. But despite that revenue growth, we now know both inflation and critical needs, specifically our capital improvement budget, they're often outpacing the current and projected funding and reoccurring funding. I'm going to talk a lot about that today and maybe what that looks like and maybe what we can do to address our capital plan later in today's presentation. But as we look at inflation, we know annual inflation in January is up about 7.5%. That's the largest really that it's been since February of 1982. I will recall back, some of us can recall back in the 1980s, I'm one of them. I can recall some of that inflation early in the early 80s, but we also know inflation subsided not too long after that. I'm not an economist. I'm not going to try to predict that and where that may go. It bears watching. Certainly, budgets are fluid, as we all know, and we can adapt. We can pivot. We did so during the pandemic. And in certain times like this, we can adapt, we can amend, we can pivot budgets. And that's just something to keep in mind as we go forward. And so some of our other budgetary challenges, not unlike inflation, local governments are not immune from inflation. Just as we see help wanted signs and advertisements in newspapers and on signs in the private sector, we certainly see it here at the local government level, and I'm sure as our school system does as well. We're seeing inflation across the board in several areas, and you can see here some of those increases. The Western Virginia Regional Jail, the Roanoke Valley Juvenile Detention Center, both those per diems and those capital factors are significantly going to hit our budget in FY23. This is new information to us that I did not have a couple of weeks ago in our last work session. So staff has been very diligent the last couple of weeks in trying to bring you a balanced budget today. We were not expecting that significant increase. Why is that increase? Just as sheriff's deputies and correctional officers at our local level in the Commonwealth of Virginia shoring up those salaries, those starting pays to be competitive, also that requirement is with our regional jail correctional officers and other personnel. They have to address that. That is a state requirement mandate, and quite frankly, it's one that should occur in order to retain, recruit, and attract employees. That could cost us, and you can see that number there significantly and will cost us significantly. In addition, the sheriff, your office is doing a great job of fighting crime on our streets and in our community. We've seen a sustained addition of inmates at the regional jail the last 2 or 3 years. At one point, we were averaging around 145. The last couple of years, that's trended upwards as much as 205, 210 inmates. It's trending some back downward now, kind of leveling back down. But that's a significant increase. And so the jail is a put and pay model. The more inmates you have, the more you pay, the more fair share that you pay. So that's why that number is pretty strong. You heard from us a couple of weeks ago with our health insurance increase of 12%. Social services and CSA budget requirements, that of course is required from the state level. There's a local component to that. Our vehicle fuel increase, we are budgeting almost $250,000 in various line items for our fleet. I will say that built into that is also a fuel reserve to hedge against even further spikes in the fuel. Maintenance service contracts, things like software and so forth, also increasing in the private sector. They also increase in the public sector. And then minimum wage. We too must address minimum wage, just like the commercial sector. And our VRS rates also, we're seeing increases. That being said, one of our key focus areas or challenge areas, as I mentioned, is the labor market. The labor market is continually constricting. I shared with you a couple of weeks ago that we had 34 open positions that were currently advertised. Approximately 11 of those are seasonal. We're seeing very few applications in those areas. We're just like other employers and businesses in the private sector. We're not seeing a lot of applications. It is an employee market, very competitive, and we, as the private sector, we still need to staff an EMS truck. So when 911 calls, we need to dispatch a deputy. We need to dispatch an EMS truck. We need to take care of the solid waste at the landfill. That requires the staffing. It requires competitive compensation. Now, I will say compensation is rising faster pace than can really be calculated in a compensation study for certain positions. Last month, the consultant was before you and presented the initial findings of our compensation study. And I thank this board for having the due diligence last summer, recognizing that it's been years since we've looked at our position classifications and salaries. We've fallen behind in those years. Now with inflation and tight labor markets, we're really, really falling behind in certain areas. As presented, that compensation study would require to fully fund that to get us to market between $1.5 and $2 million. We know that we cannot necessarily do that or should do that in 1 year. It will take a required phased approach to that, and I will share that with you in the presentation shortly. Minimum wage increases, we're seeing minimum wage increases of $105,000, and of course that results in compression. And so you can see fiscal year 23 has its challenges in some targeted or specific areas as we dive a little bit deeper. Let's talk now, and we've spent some significant time back in December discussing public safety and the demands on public safety. And this is something not only that we're seeing here locally, but we're seeing it nationally, specifically on 24/7 EMS coverage, emergency medical service coverage in the county. Over the last 5 years, since 2017, even prior to the pandemic, we've seen a sustained increase in call volumes for E911 EMS specific calls of almost 12%. Now, we all know we live in a beautiful county. Franklin County, out of the 95 counties in the Commonwealth of Virginia, we're the 6th largest landmass county in Virginia, 712 square miles. Fortunately, our public safety system is a combined career volunteer system. Our volunteers supplement our system and have for years, specifically in the fire areas, but also on rescue. As our rescue squad volunteer companies, as we've discussed many times, are no longer able to serve those calls, increasingly over the last several years, we've supported that with career staff. In Franklin County, on career staff, we have 7 career staff stations. And as pointed out in December, 60% of the time, all of last year, those 7 stations had to be staffed with part-time or overtime staff to be called in due to holiday, sick, training, vacation times that the full-time staff was out. Meaning and resulting, and as this board knows, oftentimes we did not necessarily have 7 trucks running in Franklin County. Oftentimes, even in the last few weeks, we can be down to 4 trucks, 3 trucks, meaning compounded. The trauma center in Roanoke, at Roanoke Memorial, that specifically serves Franklin County for trauma, Lewis Gale and the other major hospital facilities, when our trucks are not necessarily in Franklin County, oftentimes they're in Roanoke, spending an hour, maybe 2 hours, delivering the patient, getting the trucks back into service. So at times, there has been on occasion this last year, we've dumped our system, meaning there's a potential on occasion that we would not necessarily have a truck in Franklin County. I know that has been significant concern to you as the Board of Supervisors and to many of our citizens. And we know that's an operational challenge, and the proposed 2023 budget looks to address that. And I'll elaborate on that as we go further. Capital challenges that we have. Capital funding, and you've seen this stat from me, has remained relatively flat really since 2003, almost 2 decades. Now, we did restore an additional $200,000 last year to our budget and to the school's capital budget. So now our annual recurring revenue is about $2.4 million. That being said, for fiscal year 23, we had $12.2 million in requests with only $2.4 million in available funding. When you look at over 5 years, that's $35 million in needs. That results in a structural imbalance deficit. And so, as we've discussed in some work sessions, we really need to consider phasing in more funding for possible new revenue sources to our capital budgets going forward, specifically in areas like fire and emergency management vehicles with those rising costs. As you can see there, that is a front-load garbage truck, and we still have several in our fleet, although most of our fleet now, we've gone to the roll-off fleet concept, but we still have the need for roll-off trucks, central areas, and some of our front-load sites. As an example, that a roll-off truck today is $370,000, and as you allowed Don Smith to move forward, he's currently getting the specifications, RFPs out for a front-load truck. I will tell you, to fund a front-load truck in our CIP budget, along with sheriff department fleet vehicles, computers, just general maintenance, parks and rec, and so forth on $2.4 million, it will not happen. We will need to look at our year-end carryover and fund balances and so forth. Good news there is we have some strong areas that we can pull from to balance the budget. Point being, again, combined with solid waste vehicles and fire EMS vehicles and so forth, we fall further and further behind. And you can see that trend over the last decade or so. And this has not been updated. This was a graphic from last year. So if we update it now with even more inflation, you can see the green line is really where we should be. The blue line is really where we are. So we definitely should be in the $3.5 million range, reoccurring funding for our capital to keep up. You've seen this graphic many, many times. I won't belabor this. The cost of an ambulance today is double, fire engines double. It's not unlike inflation for a fire engine to be $20,000 more next year, and every year increasing $20,000 or so. The cost of delayed apparatus funding. As apparatus costs continue to increase and our CIP remains flat, again, we get further and further behind. Case in point, and this is a snapshot of your CIP, of the proposed fiscal year 2023 5-year capital plan. This is a snapshot just in public safety. And if you all can pay attention to the arrow here, of course, we're in the 2023 proposed. You can see we have a lease purchase on some fire apparatus on these 2 columns. You can see the EMS vehicle purchase here. Vehicle replacement, which includes, again, $183,000 in terms of reoccurring lease payments. And then you see $515,000 or so for a fire engine that's in next year's rotation. Fortunately, we were able to catch up with year-end surplus with the benefit of CARES and ARPA and other things that helped shore us up the last year or 2 during the pandemic. However, when you look out at 24-25, what happens that year is that we still have a lease purchase on 3 ambulances, but then we also have a need all of a sudden for an additional ambulance, plus a fire engine. This year is really going to catch us. And so we need to be mindful of that. Fire apparatus, EMS truck funding rotation review will be important going forward. Can we sustain that? How should we sustain that? What should the parameters be in terms of our apparatus replacement schedules, both for fire trucks as well as ambulances? Now, that being said, even with that review, we need to consider phasing in additional funding, new revenue sources in our capital budgets going forward, such as I've shared in budget work sessions, as a meals tax adjustment, as a recurring revenue stream funded by all users and not necessarily the property taxpayers, both property or personal property, but that everyone could share in that. All that being said, the fiscal year 2023 budget, we need $1.6 million, either from fund balance or carryover or from another funding source or a combination thereof. More on that during the presentation. Now that we've looked at our revenue climate, budgetary climate, as well as our needs, let's turn now to next year's budget and building next year's budget. Capacity building is defined as the process of developing and strengthening the abilities and resources that organizations and communities need to survive, adapt, and thrive in a fast-changing world. And I don't need to tell this board or the audience or anyone listening how quickly and how fast-changing our world is today, now more than ever. I will applaud this Board of Supervisors and also applaud previous boards of supervisors for taking a long strategic view, despite all the different chaos that may be around us through the years, for working diligently to sustain Franklin County. We are a low-tax community. We are a highly rated bond community, the highest rated in this portion of the state of Virginia, with very, very vigorous and healthy fund balances. We're fiscally sound. I didn't come today in the presentation to brag on all the departments. We won 2 statewide VACO awards last year. We've won our Digital Counties Award now nationally for many, many years running. I can go on and on and on. Teacher with the Franklin County School System, Mr. Swan, was Virginia's Teacher of the Year, and I can go on and on accolades regarding our school system. Franklin County has been able to do that by the due diligence and thoughtful work of taking that long strategic view through the years and integrating that through our budgets. And that's really what we're looking at doing today. How do we continue to build that capacity, sustain that capacity going forward? Well, it starts with strategic planning, and this board spent a considerable amount of time back in December on the board's strategic plan. Staff is now working on that strategic plan. We'll be picking that back up. We've been quite busy in the throes of budget and bringing back a more vetted plan to you this summer. That being said, the work that the board did in December was very beneficial to us as we've put together this budget and identifying strategic priorities. And your 6 priorities in working through that session were dynamic community safety, responsible government operations, enhanced educational opportunities, strategic economic development, conserving and promoting natural assets, and well-planned growth. And so as I go through the presentation today, I'm going to be integrating some of those priorities back to the budget. Again, we won't be able to hit on all departments today, but we did highlight a few things that I think will be beneficial to the board going forward. So capacity planning, how do we take those priorities and look and weigh those resources and needs and really balance things? Strategic capacity planning is defined as a process that seeks to balance the use of available resources so they are used to best effect while resulting in the optimum level of output. And really, I think that's what we're all doing. How do we use the resources we have, the needs that we have, balance everything, and get really, really good, strong output? And so we're going to go through those again. Responsible government operations, strategic priority. It's very important that we continually reinforce our foundation as the government, as the local government, specifically the county operations. And so this budget, proposed budget, addresses inflationary increases, fuel maintenance contracts, employee health insurance. The budget meets minimum state compensation budget requirements of the 5% cost of living and minimum wage increases. The budget attempts to balance additional position needs, we know there's several, while also addressing some of the market pay compensation plan. It prioritizes existing positions while addressing recruitment and retention, specifically in areas like law enforcement, public safety, parks and rec, general properties, solid waste, really all county departments. On frontline staff more than ever, we're seeing frontline staff competitive compensation as a critical issue. for the county. And we want to address that, and we're working to do that. And more on that as we go through the presentation. Also addressing dynamic community safety. I've shared with you our critical need for EMS and law enforcement services, and I know that's a board priority. And so this budget addresses the Sheriff's Department competitive pay. It funds the sheriff's vehicle fleets. It also funds the E91 center recording system. It's a $100,000 cost to our E911 center. It needs to be funded. It's end of life. It has to be replaced. This budget also addresses public safety EMS coverage structure. And so in that previous chart that I showed you of the 700 and some square miles of Franklin County, and really being able to make sure that we fund our trucks and our stations and provide adequate coverage. In hearing the board and looking at our public safety structure and the need to look at restructuring, how can we best, again, optimize our service needs and improve our response times to our citizens. And when someone dials 911, that not only that truck that may be at Roanoke Memorial or the other truck that may be offline, there's a staff truck or reassurance that there is a staff truck coming behind to make sure that it reaches that house that dials for that emergency medical service phone call. In doing so, this budget provides a lieutenant paramedic for each shift, thereby delivering enhanced coverage care and EMS system support while supplying an additional EMT for each shift to backfill those absences. Remember that 60% of the time? This will provide someone to backfill for vacation, sick, holiday, and training absences. That's a total of 6 positions. Those lieutenant paramedics, again, can also be triaged and utilized through a QRV to get to those response times faster, also providing really span of control. Currently, our captains oversee approximately 15 positions. That's a lot on one specific person in 700 square miles. This provides for succession planning. It also provides for enhanced coverage care, a stronger amount of care, if you will, or a higher level of care, and also all the while looking to reduce response times and improve response times here in the county. It also looks to reduce our part-time and overtime expenditures. The budget begins to address recurring funding capital needs, including that fire and EMS apparatus rotation as well as other expensive equipment in the capital plan. More on that shortly. And it provides continued and enhanced funding support to our volunteers. We recognize our volunteers are a critical part of our system, specifically on the fire side, but also the volunteer side. During the pandemic, this board was able to allocate an additional $4,000 per year allocation last year. This continues along that path of providing an additional 5% for that annual allocation to our volunteers. Again, recognizing inflationary costs for them are also critical. This budget also looks at enhancing our educational opportunities and had a wonderful presentation by Dr. Cobbs that shared with you previously. This budget enhances those educational efforts, recognizing that there is significant state and federal school funding increases, but this budget meets the local funding increase of providing $900,000 operational additional, maintains capital funding of $1.4 million, and it continues to phase out and reduce the CSA private education day placement subsidy cost of $150,000. And of course, we've been doing that now, this board may recall, for several years now, where that cost is increasingly being borne now by the school system in providing those educational services. And as Dr. Cobbs mentioned, the school system is working toward trying to do stuff more locally within the school system for private education day placements. The fiscal year 23 budget also looks to support economic opportunities, and this is just a short highlight of a few of those items. It provides continued support of our job creation and infrastructure development funds when those funds are needed for major private capital investment projects to new and existing businesses. The fiscal year 23 fiscal plan also funds support to the Small Business Development Center to strengthen small business growth and assistance. And of course, that was begun last year. We took seed funding, carryover funding, working with the Regional Small Business Development Center to provide a specific dedicated person at the Regional Small Business Development Center to provide that small business support to our businesses. That's underway, and this will continue to provide that assistance. It increases marketing efforts. It enables greater capacity to perform duties to attract new jobs and investment, as well as provide greater business retention and expansion efforts, all through various line items and so forth. As we know, strategic economic development, certainly communities live, if you will, and thrive and prosper to equal out or level out the tax burden, not just on the residents, but also sharing in that with new business investment in Franklin County. And we've seen many expansions this year with increases with Valley Star and their corporate headquarters, with Stick Pack Solutions, the Virginia Home Furnishings Market's new project, and I can go on and on and on. And our Economic Development Director, Beth Sims, shared much of that in her presentation to the board in a previous budget work session. This budget also looks to promote our community assets. One of the great things we all know and love about Franklin County, it's such a beautiful place. The budget provides funding for the Smith Mountain Lake Community Beach renovation. That park has been online now since 2007, and the beach is in needing some work. It is in need now of some work. It also enhances our trails and blueways. These are all investments that strengthen our outdoor recreation and really our community brand. As our Parks and Recreation Director, Paul Chapman, has shared with the board, we know competitive pay also is in things we may not think about in terms of our site supervisors or our game officials and so forth. And when he previously shared that with the Board of Supervisors, this looks to make those competitive pay adjustments to make us more competitive in line with our regional peers, but also helps to maintain our beautiful parks and continue to provide our abundant program offerings. And then, of course, this budget also looks to bring back the Franklin County Agricultural Fair that, of course, has been on a 2-year hiatus. And so we look forward this fall to bringing that back once again. And finally, in terms of our strategic priorities, well-planned growth. This budget continues to build upon the county's infrastructure capabilities and capacities. It supports expansion of the new landfill and facility improvements as shared with the Board of Supervisors. Our landfill staff and solid waste staff are doing much of that work themselves. They're doing a lot of the grading in the new cell 2, saving us significant amounts of dollars. But it looks to improve that facility, and know we're going to have to open cell number 2 later next year, at least get that work underway later next year. It also furthers our village planning efforts and housing growth opportunities, as previously noted. The budget looks to partner and continue our partnership on utility expansion projects. The Board of Supervisors has appropriated significant dollars, both in this area for water and sewer, but also for broadband expansion. And so as we look to the new Union Hall South Lake water tank and system connectivity that will help support residential and commercial node development there, we also know that there are needs at Westlake in terms of the sewer capacities and working with the Water Authority and addressing those needs. More on that as we get back with our Water Authority partners to the board in the coming weeks. In addition, broadband expansion. This board was able to appropriate and allocate significant dollars, ARPA dollars, $7.7 million, to leverage multiple millions of dollars from the private sector, as well as securing the Virginia Telecommunication Initiatives grant from the Commonwealth of Virginia. That was great work. We've secured and leveraged millions of dollars. This is not we'll finish it next week and we're connected next week. This is a long-term project. We know that will take years because everyone in America is wanting to be connected yesterday. We're diligently working with that with our broadband partners, Scientech and Finisky, River Street, and also Shintel. And so hearing some really, really good positive efforts and that momentum moving forward. It also positions the county great for population growth. So these are strategic investments. Again, well-planned growth goes back into the board's strategic priorities. All that being said, we know that some capacity planning, but capacity planning certainly takes capacity revenues and the revenue climate. And so I'm going to go there for a little bit, if I may, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As we look at our revenue increases, and I mentioned earlier that we're seeing modest revenue increases in the county. And I say modest, it's healthy, and we're very much pleased that our general property tax rate growth of 6.93%, or $4.1 million. That's not an insignificant amount of money. However, if you'll recall, inflation is at 7.5%. our general property tax growth is 6.9%. And so, again, those inflationary costs are really outpacing where we can keep up. We're pleased with this growth, but we recognize with inflation as it is now, it's not necessarily sustainable across all various areas, including the capital budget, and I'll share with you more on that shortly. So, as we look at our other taxes, sales, meals, transient occupancy tax, we're seeing some healthy growth there, and we're seeing some nominal state growth of about 2.9%, and really that's more from the comp board funding from the state level. Now, Dr. Cobbs has previously shared with you in terms of the school fiscal year 23 budget revenue capacity, where the state funding is increasing about $900,000. It's already mentioned the projected loss of about 210 additional students. Fortunately, the state, not only in Franklin County, but really statewide, is holding school systems harmless and recognizing this transition away, if you will, in some aspects, from public education demand in various areas. Of course, the federal funding increase of significant amount of almost $15 million. And as Dr. Cobbs mentioned, that is restricted, not unlike our ARPA funds and CARES funds that can only be utilized for certain things. And we recognize that. And in recognizing that, also recognizing the school system certainly have needs in terms of their 5% non-SOQ positions and so forth, that they would not receive that funds from the state, their insurance increases, et cetera. So this budget, of course, increases locally to the school system $900,000, maintains the $1.4 million in capital, and then again, the phase out of the CSA. So, with our revenues, we come to the point of actual expenditures and budget. This budget increases the general fund 6.7%. It addresses the inflationary increases that I mentioned earlier, the 5% COLA and minimum wages. It balances the position needs with the request. It prioritizes the positions, again, with a key eye on compensation and insurance. That being said, as we drill down further, we know we were not able to do everything for everyone and fund everything for everyone. On the specifics then, in the capacity planning budget, as we look at this big budget in terms of providing capacity in the various areas, the major priorities right out of the gate, $1.5 million of those inflationary costs. So you can see the jail, the fuel, contracts, minimum wage. There is a leave payout reserve now that we previously didn't have because we were being hit in that. We set aside $25,000 for that. That's $1.5 million. This budget covers the health insurance 12% employer and employee increases. It provides a 5% cost of living adjustment for both part-time and full-time, meeting the state requirement or the state comp board initiative. And it sets aside $1 million for phase one of our market compensation adjustments. Again, it doesn't fund all of it. It starts the phase one in doing so. We do not have that plan completely finalized with all of the details. We do have the number, again, $1.5 to $2 million. This starts in the phase of that. As I noted, it increases school operations $900,000, and then it also looks at a meals tax adjustment of 2% as an option to begin looking at funding capital. And that's something that I'm sure we'll have some more discussions on as a board and as staff. But it does provide a reoccurring revenue source that everyone looks to fund and not necessarily one segment of the population. In terms of new positions, we know a lot of positions were requested in the county. We would love to fund everything. Again, at the beginning of the presentation, I showed you the cartoon rather. Everyone wants that piece of the budget. That being said, this budget really prioritized and provides essentially only really 6 new positions, critically targeted for coverage for EMS and public safety. That being said, fortunately, there are areas within the county operations that we have part-time positions that we are recommending be elevated to full-time in some critical need areas that you've previously heard about, specifically our registrar. We know with early voting and absentee voting, that is a critical area that we've seen increase exponentially. Secondly, clerk to the court, part-time position to full-time there. That is a position that was funded years ago. Many of the clerk staff's offices, early mornings, late evenings in terms of their workload. And then finally, finance, part-time to full-time for a budget analyst or financial analyst / accounts payable. Currently part-time. We know the needs in finance continue to increase as the budget and the complexities of the budget with ARPA cares and everything that continues with all the grant money and so forth that we're looking to secure. It takes the internal staff to make sure that the foundation is there, that we don't fail. And then finally, I mentioned part-time to full-time. This budget does include some seed money, if you will, to start a part-time position in the Commissioner of Revenue's office, specifically knowing that if that position is funded, the opportunity there to capture more revenue to help pay for that position and then some. Now, that being said, their state budget is not necessarily complete yet. There is opportunity and there is some discussion of the Commonwealth of Virginia reinstating or replenishing some comp board funding that was previously taken away for existing comp board positions in various areas. If that happens, it's an opportunity for this part-time position to be fully funded, if you will, from state replenishment of comp board dollars. We don't know what that may look like yet. Again, this is just the placeholder there. You'll note my footnote, or please note the footnote rather, at the bottom on many of these slides. Expenditure projections are as of today and subject to change, both on expenditures, fuel, your guess is as good as mine, also in terms of the state budget. Your guess is as good as mine at this point. We're going on information that's the best we know today, but as I noted earlier, budgets are fluid and we can always come back and address and amend. And so the budget. Following 12 budget work sessions and board discussions, strategic planning, we've prepared a balanced budget with no property tax rate adjustments. This budget utilizes $1 million from our unassigned very healthy fund balance and carryover only for one-time capital expenditures. That front-load garbage truck I mentioned, that E911 recording system. We met with our financial advisor, Mr. Rose, again yesterday. He thinks this is very balanced in terms of capacity to utilize those for one-time expenses. A couple of years ago, the Virginia General Assembly approved legislation to give counties additional revenue flexibility that previously given cities and towns, such as meals tax adjustments. So we are recommending that, as an option, that this board consider a 2% adjustment to the meals tax to address the structural imbalance within the capital budget. Again, that's an option. It's something for us to consider. If that was considered, that would bring in approximately $600,000. That would fund the truck, the fire truck this year, as well as set aside $100,000 per year over the next couple of years. When we do hit 2 years from now, that really tough budget year that we'll have to buy several ambulances and another fire truck. The revenue can also be targeted as a capital transfer to assist with other inflationary capital expenditures, not just fire EMS, but primarily fire EMS. It's a recurring revenue source needed to assist with our structural imbalance within those critical areas of the CIP. What does the budget look like? This is the graphic we utilize every year. You can see the proposed expenditures and the breakdown there, the percentages there of the various funding areas, as well as the revenues. And so in summary, as I noted, balanced budget, no property tax rate increases. It supports strategic priorities. It includes a 2% adjustment to the meals as an option for those capital inflationary costs. The proposed $182 million budget, that primarily that increase almost entirely is really from that strong federal and state funding to the school system. The general fund budget increases 6.7%, again below inflation. In terms of our next steps, this information presentation will all be posted on the county website later today. We'll have copies of the budget in our libraries and the county finance and administration offices. In terms of our next steps, Mr. Chairman, I think you noted that today. March 15th is our regular monthly meeting on Tuesday at 1:30, but as you noted, I think this board will reassemble this Thursday afternoon at 2 o'clock, where the board can, and staff can be available to interact with questions. Of course, we have several additional work sessions built into the budget leading up to the budget public hearing, tentatively scheduled for March the 29th at 6 p.m., with a look to adopt the budget on April the 5th at 6 p.m. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'd be remiss if I did not give a sincere appreciation to the staff and to each of you for working so diligently with us, and we really I appreciate all the hard work that staff, looking at finance, looking all around the room, put into this budget.
Mr. Whitlow, on behalf of the supervisors, we want to thank the county and the school staff for their work. There's a lot of work and a lot of effort involved in these budgets preparation, and we want to thank everybody for that. One thing is a matter of housekeeping. I noticed you informed me earlier today that we needed to have broadband budget at 12. And on this, in your presentation, you said we went back at 1:30. So we,
Yes. Mr. Chairman, the regular board meeting, supervisors at 1:30, but we will have our broadband authority meeting at 12 p.m.
yes,
That's correct,
okay.
on Tuesday. And then this Thursday, day after tomorrow at 2 o'clock, we'll have our work session.
okay. Anyone? Thank you. We will stand recess until Thursday, March 10th at 2 o'clock.
Where's the budget book?
We're going to get,
Mi-
we'll get our books correct.
Yeah,
and
Mr.
then
Chairman, if I could
we'll make
ask-
sure that both Leland and Ronnie Mitchell's get theirs.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I'd ask finance staff to deliver those to the board, that way everyone can get their clean
Thank
copy.
you. Thank you all for being here today, and you got a couple days to read your books, and